Welcome to Moments in Time and Space, a microfiction podcast, bringing you tales of horror and suspense with your host, Aaron Maracle. Hello everyone. In days long gone, marriage was seen as an institution that provides stability and care for women. Courtship was a ritual, and often a competition to attract the best partner that was available. Sarah has been taught this, but she has yet to find a suitable husband. Frustrated by a lack of success, Sarah is about to take her anger out on the one person that is to blame. The hour is growing late. There was a partial moon tonight, but it was the lights from the gas lamps that provided sufficient illumination within the bedchamber. Its lone occupant sat in front of her dressing table, running a brush through her long chestnut hair. With each stroke, the old woman cursed. Her hair felt rough and brittle where she had run her fingers through it. Her evening ritual had been to brush the chestnut strands 100 times as she'd been taught by her mother. Along with the ritual, her mother repeatedly told her, "It will keep your hair looking healthy, Sarah. No man wants a woman with an unkempt appearance." Sarah threw down the brush in frustration and stared at her reflection in the large mirror set mounted on the dressing table. She scowled, and her homely reflection mimicked her expression. "Your hair never lays right. It feels like uncooked pasta and smells just as bad," Sarah complained to her reflection. "I have followed mother's advice. Well, mostly. And yet here we are, nearly a spinster, destined to die alone." Sarah shook her head in disgust. She stopped when she noticed something on her right cheek. There was a blotchiness just above the jawline. She tilted her head to get a better look in the mirror and ran a stubby finger across the edge of her jaw. The redness was barely noticeable, but Sarah saw it as bright as a beacon guiding a ship safely into the harbor. She sighed as she saw the shape of her long, narrow face in reflection in the mirror. Her mother had never called her homely, but she did encourage Sarah to lower her standards when it came to finding potential suitors. Picking up the brush once more, Sarah continued her ritual of completing the required number of strokes. Each of them was harsh and quick, channeling the anger Sarah felt for what she saw in the mirror. "Thanks to you, the kind gentleman caller has stopped coming around. If I could get rid of you, it would solve a lot of my problems." Her heart fluttered as she thought of Douglas Kelly, that lovely gentleman who had approached her at the church social last month and struck up a conversation about the weather. Sarah had been caught off guard by his interruption, but she soon was enthralled with him. He was not the most handsome of men, and perhaps his manner of dress was below Sarah's station, but she found him to be charming company. He was also the only gentleman to speak with her at length about anything in a very long time. In the evenings that followed, Douglas had taken to calling on Sarah. Most nights, Douglas would sit with Sarah in the parlor and tell her of all the places he had traveled. Sarah was spellbound by the tales Douglas told. Some nights, they would talk in the garden, and Douglas would take Sarah's hand in his. Her heart fluttered again as she remembered the soft skin of his palm against hers. It was remarkable that his skin felt like it was, considering all the labors Douglas had performed in his travels. She missed him dearly. Several weeks ago, Douglas had been called away to care for a sick aunt, and Sarah was all too happy to give him some money to help him with his travels. She was still waiting for him to write to her, and held out hope a letter would come soon. "I had the perfect man calling on me, and it was you who ruined that as well," Sarah complained to the mirror. "Every night, you sit there and mock me. I must go out in public and live with the homeliness I'm cursed by, but you get off easy. Safe in the mirror, and I don't have to worry about such things. How would—" A hand lashed out from the mirror and slapped Sarah. The blow sent her tumbling off her chair, and she cried out in pain. Sarah scrambled back to her feet and held a hand to her stinging cheek. Through the shock and surprise, Sarah gazed back at the mirror. Instead of seeing her reflection rubbing her cheek and wearing the same shocked look, Sarah saw the visage scowling at her. It slowly raised an arm and pointed at Sarah, mouthing words that she could not understand. The reflection moved closer to the surface of the mirror and reached out, grabbing the edge of the frame. It looked like it was trying to pull itself through the glass. Sarah screeched and fled from her bedroom. Down the hallway she ran, her bare feet making not a sound on the thick scarlet carpet. It took her moments to reach the grand staircase, and Sarah scrambled down the wide steps as fast as her legs could carry her. When she reached the last step, Sarah grabbed the ornate oak railing and leaned on it, trying not to collapse to the floor in panic. What had she seen? It was incomprehensible that her reflection acted on its own. Such things were not possible, and perhaps she was not well. Tonight's dinner had been underwhelming, and something had felt off about the beef stew. Maybe Sarah was asleep, and the evening meal was unsettling her stomach. That would be a logical assumption, and she'd be able to wake herself from the dream if she pinched herself. Pain would free her from this nightmare. Sarah took her forefinger and thumb to her bare arm. She grabbed a bit of her skin between the two digits and pinched hard. Pain shot through her arm, and Sarah yelped, but she did not wake. The large cold foyer loomed all around her, with its shadowy corners making it feel unwelcoming. She contemplated shouting for help, but that would be pointless at this juncture. All the servants had gone home for the night, except the butler, but he was on the far side of the house. The old fool could barely hear Sarah when she was in the same room with him. Even if he did answer her cry for help, what would she say? Her reflection had tried to attack her, and she needed to be spared to safety? As she pondered ways to remedy her current situation, Sarah let her eyes wander around the shadowy foyer. Tall portraits of descendants lined the walls, their features highlighted by the shadows in the moonlight. Oil-based images of her grandparents and parents, surrounded by frames of dark oak, lorded over the grand entryway of the home. Each of the paintings emanated an air of pride and sophistication that Sarah had often tried to mimic in her social circles. Memories of her strict upbringing tried to creep into her brain, but Sarah pushed them aside. She would find no compassion among these portraits, and she knew she was on her own. A flicker of movement among the silent paintings caught Sarah's eye. To her right, above a large mantel, hung a broad mirror. In it, she saw a reflection coming down the stairs and staring right at her. It slowly raised an arm and pointed, again mouthing silenced words with its twisted mouth. The thing began to approach the surface of the mirror, and Sarah screamed out once more. She raced across the foyer to the front door. She threw it open wide and plunged out into the night. The air was cool and brisk. Sarah could see her breath as she hurried down the front steps and raced across the large open courtyard. Sharp stones cut into the soles of her feet as she ran. Tears streamed down her face, and Sarah screamed hysterically into the night. Her retreat ended when she reached the ornate fountain in the middle of the courtyard. Her legs lost their strength, and she collapsed against the rounded edge of the fountain. Hot, sticky tears covered her face, and Sarah tried to wipe them away with the back of her hand. Her hysteria had made her lightheaded, and Sarah tried to calm herself. If someone found her in this state, they would assume that she was quite unwell. Perhaps even take her to an institution for her own safety, and lock her up the dregs of humanity. Sarah took several deep breaths of the cool night air, and leaned over the edge of the fountain. With both of her hands, Sarah scooped up some of the water and splashed it over her face. It smelled somewhat dank, since the mechanism that allowed the fountain to bubble and cycle its contents had been broken for the past week. The shock of the cool liquid snapped her out of her panic, and she began to feel less faint. A few moments of respite from the events of the night would help give her focus, and then Sarah would contemplate her next course of action. Going back into the house would not be an option, and neither would remaining alone. The garage did have a motor car or two that Sarah could use to drive to Polly White's home. It wasn't far, and Polly did often tell her to call on her if she needed anything, although Sarah doubted there was much sincerity in that offer. There was a splash, and Sarah felt something grab her long auburn hair. She squealed in pain and she felt herself being pulled backwards. After a bit of struggling, Sarah managed to free herself enough from the grip of her unseen attacker to twist around. A slender pale arm was sticking out of the water in the fountain. The slender fingers of the hand at the end of the said arm clutched long strands of Sarah's brown locks. The hand she had shaken free lashed out and grabbed another handful of hair. Slowly, the arms began to pull Sarah into the fountain. She screamed and struggled with all of her might, but the pale hands did not relent their grip. Sarah caught a brief glimpse of her leering reflection on the surface of the water before she was pulled under. She screamed one last time before the cold water rushed into her lungs and everything faded to black. Be kind to your reflection. Thank you for listening. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. You can also follow me on Twitter at MomentsInTAS. Feel free to recommend this podcast to others and help it grow. The opening and closing theme is Creepy Night by Daniel Carlton. Until next time, be safe, be smart, and be well. See you soon.